That was my one comment. Thank you. Let's take a breath together, shall we? Exhale, let it all out. Take a deep breath in. And yeah, let it out with a sound. We're going to do that 2 more times. Breathe in. Let it go. Yeah, 1 more of those together. Breathe in. If nothing else, we're going to get our deep breaths in when we're together. I am Reverend Elisha Christopher. I am the spiritual director here at the center. I do use they and them pronouns, and my ancestors came to this country from my mother's side, from Austria and Holland, my father's side, from Ireland and Scotland. Just as a reminder, America is a nation of immigrants, always has been, always will be. I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about today, and we'll see how it all comes together. If it's cohesive or not, we'll find out. But, you know, as Beth mentioned in the very beginning, today in the pagan calendar, or the Celtic calendar, is Imbolc. It's what we call one of the cross-quarter holidays. It's that point we're right in the middle between winter solstice and spring equinox. And in the Celtic traditions, this is actually the first day of spring, because it's when you can start to see things are starting to bud. When new life is just starting to happen. You can tell around, it's cold, it's wet, it's rainy, but all the things are starting to get greener right now, right? And it's also that time of year, Groundhog's Day and all that stuff kind of correlates with this thing. And really it's because this is the point of the year when our agricultural ancestors had to really start paying attention to the weather, to the signs, to the signals, to the seasons. Where are we right now? Because planting is just about to happen. We kind of have to tell, what's the weather going to be like? What are the days ahead going to be, so we can plan a little bit for where we're going to be going? Which I think is an important kind of marker for us right now, because I think in the seasons of our collective consciousness, I think that's kind of the moment we're in right now. Right? It's like we're in this moment where we have to really pay attention to the weather, to the changes, to what's going on in our environment, so that we can begin to plan for how we're going to move forward and the seeds that we're going to be planting, metaphorically, right? So just presencing that. It's also February, which is Black History Month. Not according to our government, apparently, but it is. It is Black History Month. And throughout this month, I'm just going to bring to our awareness some folks that I think have been pivotal or influential that we should know about, who are Black people who've participated in the New Thought movement, of the movement that we are part of. And so I just want to talk a little bit. How many of you know who Marcus Garvey is? Okay, some of us, half of us. So Marcus Mosiah Garvey lived from 1887 to 1940. Many people consider him to be the founder of, or the originator of the civil rights movement. That MLK, that Malcolm X, that Nelson Mandela, these folks looked to Marcus Garvey as their model, as their guide, as the one who they thought really started this movement for Black pride, for the liberation of Black people. And Marcus Garvey founded an organization called the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And what that was all about was the improvement and the uplift of the lives of Black people in the United States. And really, he's one of the founders of trying to bring together the African diaspora, the people who had been stolen from their lands and for generations had lived here, who were uprooted from their culture, uprooted from a sense of identity. And he was one of the people who brought together thousands of organizations, millions of people, not only in the United States, but also in Africa and also in Jamaica, all around building a collective identity for Black people as descendants of a rich history in Africa. And interestingly enough, he eventually gets convicted of mail fraud by the FBI and deported to Jamaica by the United States government. Thank you, J. Edgar Hoover. Because the FBI saw him as a threat to the establishment, to the structures that had been in place. And we want to give credit to President Biden. One of the last things he did in his last day in office was actually commute and pardon Marcus Garvey's sentence, which was actually a petition from Marcus Garvey's foundation and his family to the Biden administration saying, can we please acknowledge who this person was and not hold him as a criminal in the eyes of this country, but actually see him as a revolutionary and a leader for Black liberation. So one thing you might not know about Marcus Garvey is that he studied New Thought. He was a contemporary of Ernest Holmes, and he was a student of the work of Nona Brooks, who founded Divine Science. Ernest Holmes was a student of Divine Science. Marcus Garvey studied Emerson and the Transcendentalists. Ernest Holmes, founder of Science of Mind, studied Emerson and the Transcendentalists. And so there's a rich connection to the philosophy that we teach as a liberation philosophy, right? And when Marcus Garvey and many other people in his time read these works that were coming out, what they heard was this awareness of the divine inheritance, the true nature of each individual person. And there's something beautiful that in one of Marcus Garvey's speeches, he says to a group of Black people who were gathered that he was talking to, and said that, he said, his words were, "I am equal to any white man, and I want you to know the same for yourself." And I think what he meant by that was that the teachings that he had discovered, he had touched that innate piece of himself, that truth of his power, his identity as a human being, as a divine being, and that he wasn't going to let any system or any oppression or any power over him take that away. And he reclaimed that for himself, found that truth, and then said to his people, I want you to know this truth for yourself as well, right? And I want us to remember that through the lens of Marcus Garvey and many others, Science of Mind, New Thought, this philosophy that we teach has been about liberation. It's been about freedom. It's been about bringing true justice to the world. And it's an interesting little fact about our history as Centers for Spiritual Living that 80 to 100 years ago, there were a lot more churches that were predominantly Black. And today, most of our churches are predominantly white. And there's something that happened where many of the identified Black congregations actually separated from Centers for Spiritual Living. And I think part of it is because the way that we interpret our teaching comes through the lens of our awareness. And that if we look to these ideas of you are the divine and you have the ability to manifest and create, if we look at those through the eyes of privilege, through the eyes of whiteness, through the eyes of capitalism, or however we have been trained to see, we're going to see this about manifesting the stuff that we want. I can get mine using these powers and principles. But when oppressed people, and Black people, queer people, when oppressed people have read these texts, they say, this is about freedom. This is about the uplift of all people to a higher place of consciousness and action. This is about developing a deeper sense of our connection, of our diversity, of our multiplicity, of the truth of who we are. And so it's interesting just to think about the history of this philosophy that we are practicing. And what lens are we looking at it through? Right? And I think that many of us may have had the privilege of being able to look at what we teach here as this is all about manifestation. And, I think for much of the 70s and 80s, the Science of Mind was very much about manifesting your prince or princess, your palace, and your parking space. And that was like a slogan, princes, palaces, and parking spaces. You can make it happen. Which is, powerful thinking, I guess, but on the surface. There's something so much deeper here that we have access to when we're recognizing that what we're talking about is that the divine, the spark of the infinite, the life of the universe itself is looking through the eyes of every single person. Everyone. Period. Like, that is a revolutionary act of awareness. if we actually lived and breathed from that place, can you imagine how the world would be different if we met each other as God? I mean, for real though. And we preach it, we practice it, we meditate on it, we pray about it, but do you walk through the world that way? Do I? I mean, I try most of the time, but it slips away. There are moments when I get very frustrated and irritated and a little, how we can all be. But do we come back? Do we come back to the truth of who we are? Do we come back? Right? And I think that we can learn a lot from the history of oppressed people, especially now. Many of us have had the privilege of maybe not feeling those oppressions pointed at us most of our lives here in Santa Cruz. But it's changed, right? And the struggle that we're experiencing isn't new, right? You talk to most black people that I know, that I talk to, this struggle that many of us are just waking up to is not new. This has been going on all along. These systems of oppression have been here all along. They've just risen to the surface so that now they're completely visible to everyone. And we get to choose what we're going to do with that. I think we are at a pivotal time of choice. And I want to give gratitude to Beth and Val for the song, because each one of us do have a voice. We truly do have a voice. And Topher, thank you for that quote, because we may feel like ants in the face of these big grasshoppers trying to control us, but there are so many more of us than there are of them, right? And that it's in our collective consciousness that as we come together, as we stop bickering between ourselves and find our common unity, we can rise up. We can choose what path we take forward, individually and collectively. But we are at a major choice point, not only for our nation, but I think for the future of the planet, for the environment, for life on Earth. Right? Gene Houston always says, everyone before us always thought that their time was the time of the revolution, the time of the whatever. And she says, but guess what? It's actually this time. It's your time now. Everyone else before you thought it was their time, but guess what? It's your time. It's our time. And that never before have the choices that we as individuals and we as a nation make have the potential to have so much impact of the future of life on Earth itself. That we are at a major choice point. There is a powerful responsibility that's being laid on each one of us. And are we willing to say yes to it? Are we willing to say yes to the more of us? The thing that I do know is that there is something more that emerges when we come together as a collective consciousness. When we unite as a people, something more emerges. And I will tell you that that is even happening as little ripples within this community. I've had at least 5 people in the last 2 to 3 weeks in this community tell me that they've been dealing with some sort of illness or some sort of issue that suddenly is changing. And the doctors aren't even a little bit confused about how that thing went away or why it's better. I know a couple weeks ago, Reverend Tamara shared with you about some of her connection with our beloved Eric Randall and Catherine as Eric's going through his hospicing process. And I just spent some time with Eric and Catherine this week, and one of the things that they said to me is that we don't understand it, but every Sunday, Eric has so much more energy and feels so much better and sits up at the table rather than, and that there's a shift. And we said, maybe it's because you're being wrapped around by the love of your community, who's gathering, who's holding consciousness, who's being in prayer together. You're part of that, whether you're in the room or not, right? And so as we come together in prayer, let us remember that there are physical healings happening in this community. And let that be the evidence that the power of this consciousness can heal illness. And I'm going to tell you that hate and racism is a disease, right? And so if we can heal diseases in the body, then we can heal diseases in consciousness, right? But we have to start with ourselves. We have to recognize we got to do the healing work together. We're practicing that spiritual practice, and then we take it out into the world to bring that greater healing forth. You feel that? Yeah. So remember that as we come together each and every week, we're building a collective consciousness. We're building a movement. We are learning to be resilient, to hold and lift each other up. You know, I love the words of Heather Houston's song, Tending the Spark, that first line, and we will care for each other as the world around us unravels. But we will tend to the spark of hope that lives within our grieving hearts, right? So take a breath. There's a long road ahead of us, friends. There's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to be. But I want us each to remember that we are sourced by something greater than ourselves, that there is an infinite power and presence that lives within each one of us that we can call upon, and that right now that something more is being evoked, and I think it's being evoked to be called forth from each one of us. And so just keep listening to that deeper inner wisdom. I know there's a lot of chaos out in the world, and there's a strategy at work right now that wants all of us to be overwhelmed and exhausted. I heard some great advice this week. Pay attention. Look, but don't stare. Look, pay attention, see what's happening. But if you stare at it all day long, you will be overwhelmed. That's the strategy. So pay attention and then take it to prayer. Go into your practice, be in your community, cultivate joy, dance, laugh, eat with each other, share with each other, mobilize, gather. Stay informed, look, but don't stare. Right? Because we've got to stay sourced so that we feel powerful enough for the road ahead, for the days in front of us. So let's take a deep breath. Lauren, if you want to come up here with me. I just want to do a brief little process, and we'll just drop in together, Lauren, if you will. If you're comfortable, I want to invite you to stand up, or you can stay seated. But I just want to guide us all through a brief process of inviting that something more. So if you will, just begin by rubbing your hands together. We do this just to build up some energy, some chi, some of that life force. And then once you start to feel that heat or that tingle or that energy building up, pull your hands apart and just feel that buzzing energy. Each one of us is made of that life force energy. The one spirit, the one power, and the one presence. So let us just hold this knowing that the universe itself is one. But that one is seeking to express in, through, and as each one of us in unique ways. So now I want to invite us all to turn your palms facing forward. In the work of Jean Houston, we use this posture to invoke this idea. I want you to imagine that standing right in front of you is another version of you. It's the you that you could be if you could live into your highest human potential. It's the you that you would be if you had 1,000 human lifetimes to do all your human homework to become the best version of yourself. It's the version of you that has been present every moment of your life that draws you forward on the journey of becoming. This is the version of you that's fully empowered, ready to stand, to speak, to live for love. And so now imagine for a moment that you can feel as if that presence, that one who's standing before you, their hands are pressed against yours. Imagine their eyes looking back at you. And they whisper into your heart and your mind these simple words. Come be me. Come be me. They lure you forward, informing you about who you could be, about what you could do. Ernest Holmes says there's a presence that goes before us that makes the way easy and clear, that it tells us what to do, when to act, and how to act. This is that presence. And so if you choose, I want to invite you to bring that presence into you, to realize that this is that voice that has always been there, but you can bring it in with greater access, to open yourself to it. And so if you want to do that, I invite you to pull your hands back towards your body, and then as if you're putting on a great cloak, just wash that presence over you. And then bring your hands to your heart. And then stand up a little taller, breathe in a little deeper, lift up your head, your eyebrows, your chin, smile a little bit, expand with the next breath. Feel yourself empowered. Feel yourself expanding. Feel yourself becoming the you that you came here to be, because the world needs you right now. That each one of us came here to this place, to this time, with purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. Gene Houston says, now is the time, and we are the people. So let us each claim our piece, our role in this great moment of history. Because each one of us is here for the healing, for the liberation, for the freedom. Each one of us is here as the living, loving presence of God in the world. Let that truth shine through our eyes. Let that truth speak through us. Let that truth be our action, our choices, and all that we do. Remembering that each one of us has a voice. That together we are many, and together we are one. So I am grateful. I am grateful for this beloved community. I am grateful for who we are becoming, for the healings that are happening, for the awarenesses that are awakening, for the possibilities that are brewing. I'm grateful for it all. And so let us just surrender now, taking a deep breath in and letting it go. Remembering that each one of us are being breathed by something greater than ourselves. We are being lived by life itself. So let's get out of the way and open. Open, open. And so from this place, I let it be. And so it is.